The head of the World Meteorological Organization has warned the planet is headed into uncharted territory as temperatures continue to rise.
This negative trend in climate will continue for the coming decades anyhow. So we will see more climate-related challenges. And the bad news is that we have already reached such a high concentration of carbon dioxide that the melting of glaciers and snow and ice and sea level rise will continue for much longer time, for the coming hundreds of years.
Chandra Bhushan is the CEO of iForest, the International Forum for Environmental Sustainability and Technology. He joins us live from New Delhi. Chandra, the G20, they couldn't agree on concrete measures to get us down to 1.5 degrees Celsius. So COP26, the climate change summit there, is a complete bust before it's even began, right?
Well, I am cautiously hopeful. G20 did agree to 1.5C. Of course, I would have expected them to discuss more on net zero, on finance. So both sides didn't do enough, developed and developing countries. My hope is that at Glasgow, with pressure from the rest of 170-odd countries, civil society, young campaigners, we will be able to move the bar a little bit more. I believe that this is not the last COP or the last international meeting where decision has to be taken. Next year is also important. So COP26 is going to move the bar, that I am confident. How much it will move the bar, we will have to see.
But Chandra, COP1 moved the bar. Now we're at COP26 and still nothing concrete, nothing's changing. And yet you're telling us you're cautiously optimistic. I can't really see how that is.
Well, over the last 25 years, you are absolutely right. We are still a fossil fuel dependent world. 3/4 of our energy comes from fossil fuel. Our greenhouse gas emissions are at the record high, but there is also positive things that are happening. Technology is becoming cheaper, green technologies. We believe that a green industrialization is just behind the horizon, which is going to take place in the next few years. These are positive things. We should not discard these positive things. If we go with a positive frame of mind, maybe we will get something positive out of Glasgow. But going with a pessimistic frame of mind is not going to take us anywhere. So I am as I said, I am cautiously optimistic that we will get something more than what we got in Rome on climate change at Glasgow.
It's an interesting thing that you mentioned earlier. You talked about, look, OK, the G20 didn't come up with anything concrete, but they did at least accept what needed to be done. The other countries are going to put pressure on the G20. This could mean that something might change. But a lot of those countries are developing nations that don't have the money to be able to put this in place. And if they did have the money, probably the last thing they would spend it on is something like climate change, when there's hunger, poverty, education, and things like that to be addressed in those countries. How much does it need? How much does climate change need to be right at the top of the agenda for everybody?
I think it has to be right at the top of the agenda for everybody, simply because climate change is going to impact poverty, hunger, development, all the issues that we care about. Last year, India, for example, lost $87 billion, 3.25% of its GDP, because of climate impacts. These numbers are even higher for some of the African countries. So if we do not address climate change, we will have more hunger, more poverty, and poor development. So it has to be right at the top of the agenda. But what you said is equally important, that where do we get investments? Where do we get money in developing countries to move to green economy? Now, that's where I think developed countries will have to cross the aisle. They have not done enough on climate finance. They do not want to discuss loss and damage. And the $100 billion, that is a very small amount of money. OECD countries have a population of about 1.5 billion. $100 billion means that every person in OECD is going to contribute just $80 every year on climate finance. I'm sure they can afford more to save the planet. And therefore, the finance deal is going to be very, very important in Glasgow. And my hope is that developed countries including Boris Johnson, who's so concerned about climate change, will up the standard and announce much ambitious finance deal at Glasgow.
Chandra Bhushan, thank you very much for your thoughts live there from New Delhi. Thank you.
Thank you.